Moscow launched 300 drones and missiles into Ukraine on January 20th, causing over 1 million people to lose power and heating in their houses, while the temperature outside dropped below minus 13 degrees Celsius. According to Ukrainian intelligence, this attack cost over $130 million. This is the annual budget of a Russian city with 220,000 people in it. That is not the best way to spend your resources. However, who am I to disagree with the master strategist himself? The comparison Ukrainian intelligence made was deliberate. They pointed to Veliki Novgorod, a Russian city with a population of approximately 220,000, and noted that its entire annual municipal budget matched what Russia allegedly spent in one night of missile strikes. To put this in perspective, that's one night of military expenditure equaling a full year of schools, hospitals, roads, and public services for an entire city. But let's be clear about what we know for certain. On January 20th, 2025, Russia launched a massive coordinated strike involving nearly 300 drones and missiles targeting Ukrainian energy infrastructure. The attack hit multiple regions simultaneously. Over 1 million Ukrainians lost access to electricity. This wasn't happening during mild weather. Temperatures across Ukraine had plunged well below freezing, with some northern regions experiencing minus 20 degrees Celsius. The Ukrainian defense effort was equally massive. While the claimed $80 million defense cost also cannot be independently verified, we know Ukraine engaged hundreds of targets across multiple regions. The air defense systems worked throughout the night, and the scale of interceptions required enormous resources in terms of ammunition, fuel, and personnel deployment. What makes this attack particularly significant is its timing and strategic purpose. This was not about taking territory. This was about making Ukrainian cities uninhabitable during the coldest months of winter. By January 2025, Russia had shifted its military strategy from attempting to rapidly capture Ukrainian territory to a longer-term campaign of systematic destruction. The pattern had become clear over the previous months. Russia was targeting thermal power plants, electrical substations, and heating infrastructure. Each successful strike didn't just cause immediate damage, it created cascading failures across interconnected systems. When one power plant goes down, others must compensate. When those become overloaded, entire regions go dark. The human cost of the January 20th attack extended far beyond the initial blackouts. In Kyiv, the power situation had become so severe that residents experienced 3 hours of electricity followed by 10 hours without power. This wasn't just an inconvenience. At minus 13 degrees and colder, loss of heating becomes life-threatening within hours. Over 600,000 residents had already fled Kyiv by this point, driven out not by advancing armies but by the simple impossibility of surviving winter without reliable heat and electricity. In Dnipropetrovsk Oblast, more than 1 million people found themselves without water and heating following attacks on infrastructure. Water systems freeze, pipes burst, apartment buildings become uninhabitable. The international community responded, though the scale of aid couldn't match the scale of destruction. The European Union deployed 447 generators from emergency reserves in Poland, worth 3.7 million euros. These included 445 low-capacity generators and 2 high-capacity units distributed across 9 regions including Kyiv, Donetsk, and Kharkiv. But here's the mathematics that reveals the challenge Ukraine faces. The EU provided 3.7 million euros in generators to help cope with damage from attacks costing, by Ukrainian estimates, $130 million. Even if that Russian expenditure figure is significantly overstated, the fundamental equation remains. The cost to destroy vastly exceeds the cost to defend or repair. Norway provided missiles for NASAM's air defense systems, which proved remarkably effective, achieving a 94% success rate against cruise missiles and drones. However, NASAMS cannot intercept ballistic missiles due to radar limitations. This created a strategic problem. Russia could mix its attacks, using cheaper drones to deplete expensive interceptor missiles, while ballistic missiles struck targets that air defense couldn't stop. While Ukraine battled to keep the lights on, diplomatic efforts were moving forward. In late January, the first trilateral talks between the United States, Ukraine, and Russia took place in Abu Dhabi. These were the first direct negotiations involving all three parties since Russia's full-scale invasion began. The American delegation included Steve Witkoff, Trump's special envoy, along with Jared Kushner and several senior military officials. Russia sent a high-level team led by Admiral Igor Kostyukov, chief of the GRU, Russia's Military Intelligence Directorate. The talks lasted approximately 4 hours and took place behind closed doors at a secure diplomatic residence. But Russia's public statements before, during, and after these talks made their position clear. They demanded complete Ukrainian withdrawal from Donetsk and Luhansk, including territories they haven't been able to capture militarily. Putin stated explicitly that Russia insists on obtaining the entire territory of Donbas, including the three major remaining Ukrainian-controlled cities, Kramatorsk, Sloviansk, and Konstantinivka. Russian Foreign Minister Lavrov went further, referencing Novorossiya, an old imperial term for southern and eastern Ukraine, including Kharkiv, Dnipropetrovsk, Odessa, and Mykolaiv oblasts. This wasn't subtle. Russia was broadcasting that its territorial ambitions extended far beyond what it currently controls. The disconnect became clear. Russia was spending enormous sums to make Ukrainian cities uninhabitable, while simultaneously demanding territorial concessions as a prerequisite for peace talks. They couldn't occupy these cities militarily, so the strategy appeared to be making them uninhabitable while demanding Ukraine surrender them anyway. Meanwhile, significant developments were happening on other fronts. In a stunning admission, a Russian military court officially acknowledged for the first time that Ukrainian missiles sank the Moskva cruiser in April 2022. For nearly 4 years, Russia had maintained the ship sank due to an onboard fire. The court sentenced Ukrainian Colonel Andriy Shubin to life imprisonment in absentia and ordered him to pay 2.2 billion rubles in damages, approximately $28 million. This admission came buried in a legal document that was quickly removed from the court's website, but not before it was preserved and published. After years of propaganda claiming the Moskva was lost to accident, Russia's own military justice system confirmed Ukraine had sunk their Black Sea flagship. At sea, France demonstrated a more aggressive stance toward Russia's shadow fleet. On January 22nd, French naval forces seized the oil tanker MT Grinch in the Mediterranean. This wasn't just monitoring or tracking, it was active interdiction. The tanker, which had departed from Murmansk earlier that month, was sailing under a false flag and was subject to US, EU, UK, and Canadian sanctions. The Shadow Fleet issue represented a massive sanctions evasion operation. While the broadcast mentioned approximately 100 tankers, the actual scale is far larger, closer to 600 vessels according to multiple sources. These aging tankers, often sailing without proper insurance or safety standards, generate billions in revenue that funds continued military operations. Russia's oil revenues, while reduced from peak levels, still provided substantial funding for the war effort. Monthly revenues from all fossil fuels ranged between 16 and 21 billion euros, with oil representing the majority. This created a direct connection. Every tanker that evaded sanctions meant more missiles like those fired on January 20th. On the ground in Ukraine, the front lines told a different story from the diplomatic negotiations. Ukrainian forces reported 222 separate combat clashes on January 22nd alone, with 92 of those occurring in the Pokrovsk sector. This represented a 68 clash increase from the previous day. The fighting around Pokrovsk had become a grinding battle of attrition. Ukrainian Commander-in-Chief Syrskyi reported that Ukrainian forces had neutralized 15,000 Russian troops in the Pokrovsk area during January alone, 7,000 killed and 8,000 wounded. Russia was losing approximately 500 soldiers per day in this single sector, yet continued pushing forward. The winter conditions affected both sides. Ukrainian troops released footage showing the brutal reality of fighting in extreme cold. Soldiers in trenches dealt with temperatures reaching -20 degrees Celsius, with reports of widespread frostbite casualties. When you're holding a position in an exposed trench with inadequate shelter, the cold becomes as dangerous as enemy fire. Weather forecasters predicted the extreme cold would continue, with some areas potentially seeing temperatures drop to -25 degrees Celsius. A blizzard and brief warming period were expected, which would turn frozen battlefields into muddy quagmires, temporarily reducing combat intensity, but creating new challenges for troops on both sides. Against this backdrop of winter warfare, infrastructure destruction, and grinding attrition, Ukrainian President Zelensky made clear statements about what Ukraine needed. He emphasized that Ukraine had prepared a document on security guarantees and was waiting for the United States to respond. He also proposed that Ukraine could take action against Russian naval vessels, while allies provided long-range weapons to strike Russian military-industrial facilities producing the missiles that were devastating Ukrainian cities. This brought the strategic picture into focus. Russia was spending vast sums, whether exactly $130 million per attack or not, to systematically destroy Ukrainian infrastructure. They were doing this while demanding territorial concessions they couldn't achieve militarily. Ukraine was defending at enormous cost, both financial and human, while over 1 million people sat in freezing darkness. The January 20th attack, whatever its exact cost, represented a clear strategy. If Russia cannot occupy Ukrainian cities, it will make them unlivable. If it cannot defeat Ukrainian forces in the field, it will target the civilian population's ability to survive winter. This is not conventional warfare aimed at military victory. This is a campaign of exhaustion, betting that Ukraine's allies will tire of providing support before Russia exhausts its resources. The mathematics of this approach are brutal but simple. It costs far more to rebuild destroyed infrastructure than to destroy it. It costs more to intercept missiles than to fire them. Each successful attack forces Ukraine to spend resources on repair and humanitarian aid rather than military capability. And during winter, each power plant destroyed doesn't just hurt the economy, it forces civilians to choose between fleeing or enduring potentially lethal conditions. What the January 20th attack ultimately revealed is that this war has entered a new phase. The front lines move slowly, measured in kilometers gained or lost over months. But the real battlefield has expanded to every Ukrainian city within range of Russian missiles and drones. The weapons are measured in hundreds of millions of dollars, the casualties in millions of people without heat or power, and the timeline in winters yet to come. Whether Russia spent exactly one city's annual budget that night or some other enormous sum, the strategic reality remains unchanged. This is now a war of industrial capacity, financial reserves, and political will. Russia is betting it can outlast Western support for Ukraine. Ukraine is betting it can survive long enough for that support to make the difference. And millions of civilians are making it through each frozen night, one generator at a time, hoping the lights come back on before the next winter arrives.